This is a LSD, Cannabis, a Ketamine trip report by Cubbage, posted to erowid.org on December 10th, 2023. I am 23 years old, and I have spent the better part of a decade moving through a wide variety of psychoactive chemicals. I have tried everything from the most intense hallucinogen known to most people, DMT, to the most destructive stimulant, methamphetamine, and everything in between. My first true encounter with a substance that altered my social life happened in the year 2014. I was just beginning to emerge from a shell that kept me quiet and isolated. The first night I took a Gary, the name we use for ecstasy tablets in the north. I felt my walls crumble. The music seemed to pulse through my veins. Strangers became friends, and the whole world glowed with a new kind of color. That night changed the direction of my life. I entered a period of what my friends called seshing, a slang word for endless parties and endless experimentation. We learned about each other through the haze of substances, and we learned how to push the limits of what we thought possible. When we discovered psychedelics, they became the drug of choice for our raves, for our nights out, for our moments of curiosity. LSD, mushrooms, DMT, each one offered a different flavor of the same underlying truth. For a while, everything was sunshine and rainbows. The chemicals gave us a sense that we could reach into the source of reality itself, that we could download information directly from the fabric of existence. I began to think that I could use psychedelics in any environment, that I could sit in a coffee shop and still see the same patterns that I saw on the dance floor. That belief carried me forward until I reached a night that would test everything I thought I understood. The date was November 11th, 2017. I was 20 years old. The night was a drum and bass bassline event at a venue that most people on the street knew only by its reputation. 10 of us had decided to go. We spent the afternoon preparing, checking each other's supplies, making sure we had enough water, checking that we had a clear plan for getting home. We were aware that security at the venue would be strict, that any visible substance could get us turned away. That knowledge made us decide to ingest most of our chemicals before we even left the flat. The plan was simple. I would take a 250 microgram LSD tab. I would smoke several joints of strong cannabis, and I would take a small dose of ketamine on the way to the event. My friends would do the same, each of us taking our own measured amount. I set my intention that night with a seriousness that I had never applied to a party before. I wanted to see past the ordinary patterns of my mind, to glimpse the underlying code of reality, to understand why I felt so disconnected from the world outside of the party scene. I wanted to confront my own ego, to see if it could be dissolved without losing my sense of self. I wanted to feel the music not just as sound, but as a living organism that could guide me through whatever visions would appear. I told myself that I would stay grounded, that I would keep an eye on my friends, that I would not let the chemicals take me too far from the people I cared about. We measured the LSD tabs carefully, each one a small square of paper with a faint imprint. I placed the tab on my tongue, feeling the bitter taste of the gelatin as it dissolved. I took a long drag from the first joint, the smoke filling my lungs, the taste of earth and pine lingering on my tongue. I repeated the process with 2 more joints, feeling the familiar warmth spread through my chest. The ketamine was a small powder that I dissolved in a sip of water, the bitter aftertaste reminding me that I was about to step into a different world. I swallowed, feeling the liquid travel down my throat, the chemicals already beginning to mingle in my bloodstream. The walk to the venue took about 30 minutes. The streets were slick with rain, the streetlights casting long shadows on the wet pavement. The city seemed to pulse with a low hum that I could not yet identify. My heart beat a little faster than usual, but I told myself it was just the anticipation of the night. The ketamine gave me a slight sense of detachment, as if I were watching myself from a short distance away. The cannabis softened the edges of my thoughts, making everything feel a little more fluid. The LSD was still hidden, waiting for its moment to surface. When we arrived at the entrance, the line stretched down the alleyway like a snake. The venue itself was a dilapidated manor, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer, sweat, and the faint sweet scent of incense that some of the other attendees had lit. The security guard at the door looked us over with a practiced eye, but he did not see any contraband. We slipped inside, the heavy doors creaking shut behind us, and the bass began to thump through the concrete floor. The first few minutes inside were a blur of color and sound. The lights flickered in strobe patterns. The speakers pumped out a relentless bass line that seemed to vibrate my bones. I felt the first subtle shift in my perception about 10 minutes after I had taken the LSD. The colors on the walls began to bleed into each other, the red laser lines turning into ribbons of liquid fire. The music seemed to acquire a shape, a three-dimensional form that moved around me like a living creature. I could feel the beat in my chest, not just as a sound but as a pulse that matched my own heartbeat. My friends were around me, dancing, laughing, shouting over the music. Croshatch, a lanky kid with a shaved head, was shouting something about the bass being like a heart attack for the soul. Keck, our resident ketamine enthusiast, was stumbling a little, his eyes glazed over, his words slurring into nonsense. I could see the way their bodies moved, the way they seemed to merge with the crowd, each one a part of the larger organism that was the rave. The LSD began to climb. My vision started to split into layers. The walls of the manor seemed to breathe, the plaster expanding and contracting as if it were a lung. The floor beneath my feet turned into a grid of tiny hexagons that glowed with an inner light. When I looked at the DJ, his hands moving the knobs, I saw his fingers become streams of light, each turn of the dial sending out a ripple that spread across the crowd like a wave. The music itself seemed to become a physical thing, a thick rope of sound that I could wrap around my shoulders. I felt my ego begin to dissolve in small, almost imperceptible ways. The thought, I am here, softened into, I am part of this. I found myself no longer thinking about my own body, but about the space around me, the space between the beats, the space between the people. I could feel the boundaries of my own mind stretching, becoming porous. The sense of self that had been a solid stone for most of my life turned into a thin sheet of paper, fluttering in a wind I could not see. As the music built toward a climax, the visual field exploded. The walls of the manor seemed to melt away, revealing an endless field of stars that stretched into a violet horizon. The crowd became a sea of silhouettes, each one outlined in a soft glow. I could see each person's aura as a faint halo of color, some bright orange, some deep blue, some almost invisible. The brighter auras seemed to pulse in time with the bass, as if the music was feeding them. The dimmer auras were like shadows, their faces featureless, their bodies like icons waiting to be unlocked. I could sense that each of these people carried a story, a strand of consciousness that was part of a larger tapestry, but I could not yet read the words. In the middle of this, a thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. I saw a reality where Keck had been run over by a car, his head crushed, his blood spilling onto the pavement. The image was vivid, the sound of screeching tires, the smell of gasoline, the sight of his body twisted. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. I began to speak aloud, as if trying to convince myself that this was not real. Keck is alive, Keck is fine, I shouted, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. Some people turned to look at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. I waved my ticket in the air, asking if anyone had seen my friend, if anyone knew what had happened. The words came out in a frantic rush, each sentence tumbling over the next. The panic faded as quickly as it had risen. I realized that the vision was a fragment of a possible timeline, a simulation my mind had generated to test my fear of loss. I felt a wave of relief wash over me when I saw Keck dancing again, his head intact, his smile wide. The relief was so strong that for a brief moment I felt grounded again, as if my mind had found a solid rock to cling to. The music continued, the bass thumping, and I let the rhythm pull me back into the flow. From that point on, the experience became a cascade of surreal images. The DJ's hands turned into a pair of medical defibrillators, the knobs on his controller becoming electrodes that sent bright sparks of electricity into the crowd. I could see the blood of the music, a bright red river flowing from the speakers, coating the floor, the walls, the people. The entire venue seemed to be bleeding, each drop a note, each splash a chord. The visual was so vivid that I could almost taste the metallic tang of it on my tongue. The crowd's auras grew more distinct. Those with bright, saturated colors seemed to be surrounded by intricate patterns like fractal vines that wrapped around their bodies. Their faces were detailed, their eyes alive with a fire that matched the music. Those with dim or black auras were like silhouettes, featureless, their outlines smooth and unadorned, as if they were waiting for a game to unlock them. I felt a deep sense of empathy for each of them, as if I could sense the weight of their personal histories, their hopes, their fears, all compressed into a single hue. I felt myself tapping into a larger intelligence, a sense that each person's consciousness was a thread in an infinite loom. The loom was constantly weaving, each thread moving, growing, intertwining with others, yet each thread also existed on its own, a single point of awareness. I could feel my own thread, thin but bright, moving through the tapestry, sometimes merging with others, sometimes standing alone. The realization that reality was a dream, that consciousness was a self-generating loop, filled me with awe. The music shifted to a deeper, more hypnotic bass line, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate the very air. I found myself drawn toward a different area of the manor, a darker room where the bass was almost physical. The sound was so powerful that I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket, as if the vibrations were being transmitted through the floor. I could not resist the pull. I threw the phone across the room, watching it spin and clatter against a wall. The device bounced and landed on the floor, its screen flickering with distorted images of the crowd. In that moment, a random man approached me, his expression hostile. He began to push me, to shout at me for reasons I could not understand. The crowd around us seemed to form a barrier, some people stepping forward to defend me, others turning away as if they could not see what was happening. My mind was a swirl of confusion. The lines between reality and hallucination blurred. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a sharp spike that cut through the warm glow of the LSD. I realized that I needed fresh air, that the pressure of the room was becoming too much. I stepped out of the venue into the cold night, the rain having stopped, leaving the streets glistening with reflected neon lights. The night sky was a deep navy, the stars barely visible through the city glow. The air was cool on my skin, the wind carrying a faint scent of wet pavement and distant diesel. The visual patterns that had filled my mind did not disappear. They lingered now, overlaying the real world like a translucent film. I could see fractal shapes in the puddles, each ripple a miniature galaxy. I felt a sense of unity with the city, as if the buildings, the streetlights, the passing cars were all part of the same living organism I had been witnessing inside the rave. I walked along the road, my steps unsteady but purposeful. The music from the venue faded into the background, replaced by the distant hum of traffic and the occasional siren. My thoughts drift in and out of focus like a radio caught between stations. The music that once seemed distant now presses against my skull, a low thrum that vibrates through my teeth. I feel the rhythm in my chest, each beat a pulse that expands outward, touching the walls of the street, the windows of the shop, the faces of strangers passing by. The neon signs above the alley flicker, but they are no longer just lights. They become breathing organisms, each pulse of color a breath. I watch a blue sign pulse twice, pause, then pulse again, as if it is inhaling and exhaling. The air around me feels thicker, as if I am moving through water, yet my feet remain firmly on the concrete. The visual patterns that have been clinging to my mind begin to sharpen. They are no longer a vague overlay, but a lattice of bright lines that intersect at points of light. At each intersection, a tiny spark ignites, then fades, then another spark appears somewhere else. I can trace the lines with my eyes, following them as they weave around the street lamps, around the graffiti on the brick walls, around the faces of the few people still standing outside the venue. Their faces are strange now. Some appear as solid, others as outlines of light, some as static silhouettes that shift when I try to focus. A sudden wave of warmth spreads from my stomach up through my throat and out through my mouth. My tongue feels heavy, as if coated in syrup. I swallow, and the taste of the weed I smoked earlier returns, earthy and sharp. The ketamine that I took on the way to the venue sits low in my gut, a dull, grounding pressure that keeps my thoughts from scattering completely. The LSD, the dominant force, pushes the edges of my perception outward, stretching the world like a piece of rubber being pulled at the corners. I feel my ego begin to dissolve, but not in a clean way. It feels more like a wall crumbling, brick by brick, each piece falling away and turning into dust that drifts into the night sky. I no longer feel separate from the street, from the lights, from the people. I am part of the whole, and the whole is part of me. The thought of my own name feels strange, as if it belongs to someone else. I hear my own voice in my head, but it is distant, as if spoken through a long pipe. The peak arrives as a sudden surge of clarity. It is not a calm clarity, but a bright, sharp flash that cuts through the haze. I understand, in a simple way, that the patterns I see are not random. They are a map, a set of connections between everything that exists. I can see the line that runs from the neon sign to the puddle on the ground, then up to the cloud of steam rising from a man's cigarette. I can see the line that connects the distant siren to the flickering streetlight, then to the rhythm of the bass that still hums in my ears. The connections are simple, direct, and they make sense in a way that feels both obvious and profound. I notice a group of people standing near the entrance of the venue, their heads tilted back, eyes closed, moving slowly to the beat. Their auras, which I could see earlier as faint glows, now flare brightly. Some auras are deep red, others bright green, some a soft yellow. The colors shift as they breathe, as if the aura is a living thing that expands and contracts. I feel a pull toward them, a desire to join their rhythm, to become part of their movement. I step forward, my foot catching on a loose piece of gravel, and I stumble. The fall is gentle, as if the ground catches me, but the sensation of falling is intense. I land on my side, the concrete cool against my skin, the sound of my own breath loud in my ears. Lying there, I feel the world spin slower. The streetlights become circles of light that rotate slowly like planets in orbit. The sound of traffic becomes a low hum, a background noise that does not distract but supports the whole experience. My mind is filled with a sense of peace that is not the calm of a quiet night, but a deep, resonant calm that vibrates through every cell. It is as if I have found a place inside myself where everything is still, even while the world around me is moving. The plateau begins as the sharp flash of the peak softens into a steady glow. The patterns remain, but they are less intense, more like a gentle background. The colors of the auras stay, but they no longer pulse with each breath. They are now a constant wash of light that surrounds each person. I feel my body becoming lighter, as if the weight of my limbs is reduced. My legs, which were sore from the run, now feel as though they are made of foam. My hands, which were clenched, open naturally, fingers splayed as if I am reaching for something just out of sight. I start to talk to the people around me, but the words come out strange. My mouth forms sounds, but the meaning is not clear. It feels as if I am speaking a language that is older than any spoken word, a language of feeling and intention. The people respond in the same way. Their faces are calm, their eyes bright. We exchange glances that seem to convey more than any sentence could. I feel a sense of belonging, a sense that we are all part of a larger whole, each of us a note in a larger song. The night continues, and I walk farther from the venue. The streets become emptier, the neon signs dimmer. I pass a small shop with a flickering sign that reads "Open." The glass window reflects my face, but my face is distorted, stretched like a piece of melted wax. I see my eyes, wide and bright, my mouth slightly open, as if I am about to speak. I reach out and touch the glass. The surface is cold, and a shiver runs up my arm. The reflection ripples, and for a moment I see not my own face, but a multitude of faces, each one slightly different, each one smiling. I keep moving, my steps unsteady but guided by an inner compass that seems to know exactly where I need to go. The city feels alive, breathing, pulsing. The wind picks up, carrying with it the smell of rain that has not yet fallen. The sky above is a deep navy, but now I can see faint stars, each one a pinprick of light that seems to flicker in time with the music that still lingers in my mind. I feel the beat in my chest, a slow, steady rhythm that matches the pulse of the city. As the night wears on, the effects of the ketamine begin to settle. The grounding pressure in my stomach eases, leaving a gentle warmth that spreads through my core. The weed's earthy taste fades, replaced by a faint sweetness that reminds me of the sugar in the soda I had earlier. The LSD remains the dominant force, but its intensity is now more manageable. I can think more clearly, though my thoughts are still colored by the visual patterns that surround me. I find myself at a small park, a patch of green in the middle of the concrete. A bench sits under a lone street lamp, its light casting a soft circle on the ground. I sit down, the metal cool against my skin. The bench creaks slightly as I shift my weight. I close my eyes, and the visual patterns that have been overlaying everything begin to fade, but not disappear. They linger at the edge of my vision like a film that never fully ends. I breathe in, feeling the cool night air fill my lungs, and exhale slowly, watching the breath leave my body as a faint mist. The come down begins as the bright flash of the peak recedes further, leaving behind a gentle afterglow. My thoughts become more linear, less like a swirling vortex. I can recall the moments of the night with more detail. I remember the feeling of the concrete under my hand when I touched the shop window, the sensation of the wind on my face as I ran, the taste of the grape-flavored soda I drank in the shop, the sting of the punch I received from the man who ran toward me. Each memory is vivid but not overwhelming. I can hold them in my mind without being pulled under. My body feels tired but not exhausted. My muscles are sore from the running, especially my calves and the tops of my feet, which have taken the brunt of the pavement. My left eye is bruised, a dark circle forming around the iris, a reminder of the punch. I can feel the ache, but it is a dull ache, not sharp. My head feels light, as if a weight has been lifted. I notice the slight ringing in my ears, a faint echo of the bass that still hums in the background. It is not painful, just present. I stay on the bench for a long time, watching the streetlights flicker, listening to the distant hum of traffic, feeling the night wind brush my skin. My mind drifts back to the insight I had earlier, the sense that reality is a network of connections, that each person is a node, each thought a thread. I realized that the insight was not a grand revelation, but a simple observation, like noticing that a rope is made of many strands. It is easy to see when one is looking at it directly, but hard to notice when one is tangled in it. The after effects of the LSD begin to settle into a gentle background hum. Colors are still brighter than normal, but not overwhelming. The world feels slightly more saturated, as if a filter has been placed over everything. My senses are heightened, but not to the point of overload. I feel a calm that is different from the peace of the peak. It is a quiet acceptance, a feeling that I have been through something intense and have returned to a place of stability. I think about the people I encountered earlier, the strangers who seemed to share my experience, the police officers who later appeared in the narrative. I realized that during the height of the trip I was not fully aware of the consequences of my actions. I was running naked, I was punching a man, I was confronting officers. The memory of those moments is fuzzy, but the emotional tone remains. Fear, excitement, confusion. I notice that the fear has lessened, replaced by a sense of curiosity about why I acted that way. I wonder if the dissolution of my ego allowed me to act without the usual filters, to act on impulse without thinking about the outcomes. I begin to feel the pull of sleep, a heaviness in my eyelids. I stand up from the bench, my legs a little shaky. I make my way back toward the venue, but I do not enter. I walk past the building, its windows dark, its doors closed. I stand on the curb, looking at the cityscape, the neon signs, the streetlights, the distant stars. I feel a sense of gratitude for the experience, for the way it opened a window onto a different way of seeing. I also feel a sense of responsibility, a recognition that the chemicals I took have consequences, that my actions affect others, that the line between insight and chaos is thin. I head home, my steps slower now, the city lights guiding me. I reach the door of my flat, the key cold in my hand. I open the door and step inside, the familiar smell of stale pizza and old books filling my nose. I drop my bag on the floor, the weight of it a reminder of the substances I carried. I sit on the couch, the fabric rough against my skin. I close my eyes again, this time to let the after effects settle fully. The plateau continues for a while, a gentle hum of awareness that stays with me. I think about the insight that reality is a network of connections, and I wonder how to apply that to my daily life. I think about the moments of ego dissolution, and I wonder how to keep a sense of humility without losing my sense of self. I think about the fear I felt when I was confronted by police, and I wonder how much of that fear was a protective mechanism, how much was simply the body reacting to an unknown situation. I notice that my thoughts are now more organized. I can see the thread that runs through the night, the desire to explore, the push of the chemicals, the breakdown of boundaries, the insight, the return. I feel a sense of closure, as if the story has reached an end point. I do not feel the need to replay every detail, only to keep the useful parts, the lessons, the feelings that matter. The night passes and the sun begins to rise. The sky lightens, turning from deep navy to a pale gray. The city slowly awakens, the sounds of early commuters beginning to stir. I open my eyes fully, the room brightening. My head feels clear, the ringing in my ears fading. My body feels sore but functional. I stand, stretch, feeling the muscles in my back and legs loosen. I make a cup of coffee, the bitter taste grounding me further. I sit at the kitchen table, the steam rising, the aroma filling the room.